Hello and welcome. My name is Gert from SEOleverage.com. We've been talking for years that mobile is on the rise today. I've got several clients getting more than 70, 80% mobile traffic. Um, and it's interesting when you think about it, what it really takes to convert a website into a mobile optimized version. And for this question, I'm really happy to welcome back a past guest on this show, Justin Meadows from tunewp.com. Welcome, Justin.
G'day. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for taking the time. We're in touch all the time because we very often refer clients to your technical services here. But today you're going to address specifically user experience on mobile phones, which is a topic I think is more and more interesting in latest Google updates, May core update, December update in SEO. We see Google focusing more and more on user experience. And if you think about it, the behavior on a mobile phone is very different from a desktop, and always very often it's just, I think, based on the moment you're in when you're on a mobile phone versus when you're at a desktop. So just think of the last time I was picking up my kids from school, I was waiting outside, taking out my phone, checking a few websites, and I just found, probably just based on on what we're working in, I just found that many websites get it completely wrong. There's just things you can adapt whatever is a desktop design to mobile just by showing it in one column. And I think there's a lot more to it. I know you've got plenty of experience here. And I would just want to start with this question. What does it really take to have a good mobile user experience?
Yeah, sure. I think you're absolutely right about the fact that people are in a different headspace when they're on a mobile phone. There's a good chance that they might be lying in bed just before they go to sleep, or they might be standing in line at the post office, or they're waiting to pick up the kids from school. They're sitting on the couch because they're finished for the day or something like that. So they're not often in a productive work mode like they are on the desktop, and that means that they have a much shorter attention span. And that's certainly the first thing that you need to think about. Everything needs to be simple and easy and quick. Um, and so when you start making things a little bit hard for them to find things on the phone, people give up a lot faster. Already people's attention spans are very limited, and people get frustrated easy when they're trying to work out something on a website.
Right.
It's an important factor, but on a phone it's even more so. And so there's a number of considerations, and it is definitely becoming more important with the mobile first updates. A lot of in Google now, it's been, I think it's now mobile only, or will be very shortly. But yeah, mobile first is where, before considering the desktop layout of your website, it's looking at the mobile version first and assessing the website based on that. And it's been the word mobile first has sort of come from design principles that have been around for a while, but it's been sort of slow to adapt. I know a lot of website designs are still desktop first design. So people are looking at laying out the desktop nice and big on their huge Mac screens while they're designing it. And then afterwards they try and squish it into a tiny little screen.
Absolutely. This is. I just want to add here. It's just so important because I'm seeing this all the time. Designs I very often get from clients when they do the redesign. They're so happy about their new design draft. They forward me the first design draft from the clients. It's always desktop design. It's always desktop design. Even sites that get 85% mobile traffic are going to the designer, and the designer doesn't care about data. They just put up the desktop design first and then say, yeah, we just shift this then so it works on a mobile phone. Why is it this way? Why don't you start with where most of your people are? And very often people also don't realize that in Google Analytics they can break down data by mobile or desktop. And for example, people know their bounce rate most of the times, but they don't break it down because your bounce rate on a mobile phone might be much higher, probably is much higher than on the desktop, just based on the fact that the user experience is just not the same.
Mm. And I think apart from the comparing the different devices, it's worth digging into the bounce rate number on your website, because looking at it on different types of pages on your site, a lot of people associate the bounce rate with being really bad um, on a landing page. So on a sales landing page, if you're paying ad traffic to come to a page and it's got a high bounce rate, that's bad. But if you're looking at your content pages, it's actually pretty common to have a high bounce rate, because that means that people have come, they've read the article, they got what they wanted, and off they went. So it's common to see a higher bounce rate on those kind of pages. And if you're looking at the whole website as a whole, then it can be a bit misleading. You've got to dig into what's happening on each page.
Absolutely. I just had a call with a client yesterday evening, I think, where we also said, look, this is the overall traffic evolution, and this is then specific going to specific articles. Very often, if you don't drill down in Google Analytics, you don't really get the full picture. But the only thing people might be looking at is the overall number going better, going up, going down. But you really need to drill down to channels, to conversions as well, etc. So it's definitely important. I remember working, this was years ago, as a programmer in a company. They were offering those ringtone downloads, and we had to program this. This is really dates me. Sounds like ancient times these days, because you had to offer a specific ringtone for a specific mobile phone model. But the reason I remember this now is because my boss back then spent a lot of time in getting the statistics right, and he would know exactly which version of which model of which brand of mobile phone converted at which percentage. So automatically, I think probably from back then, I always drill down into the last level, and which browser they're using, and which version is this, and which phone has a higher bounce rate. Let's check this out with a simulator on this phone and see what this looks like on this phone. Maybe there is an issue with a certain version or something like this, especially when you just take it from priorities. I think these days we don't have the compatibility issues anymore. We had really serious issues back then. These days, most browsers render pages rather decently, I would assume. But still, sometimes there's just a big difference in conversion rate, for example. So you definitely want to know your data here to make the right decisions, and definitely focus on the mobile. If mobile is your top traffic source, everything should really circle around the mobile phone.
Yeah, and I think another thing that gets left out as well is the tablet, and it's not a usually a large traffic source, but it is it is sometimes around 5-10%, and quite often the design is just made for either desktop or mobile, but in between it all looks horrible in the tablet.
Absolutely, especially the vertical format on the horizontal format on tablets very often is pretty similar, but then you turn the tablet and you have to leave the page because everything is just really either looking ugly or misaligned or just doesn't work yet. Absolutely right. So the tablet, I very often refer to the tablet as like the intermediate device. So I might find something on a mobile phone, check it out in the evening on the couch or on the tablet, and then maybe convert in the next day on the desktop. So very often we see tablet could be a potential medium device. It might not be necessarily the device where people convert, but it might be the device they just use to further explore your offer, your services, etc., compare, read your content, etc., and then either convert on the mobile again or convert on the desktop.
Yeah, when it comes to the different sort of layout things to consider, I think on the tablet and on the phone, it's quite often to have good to have the same type of menu going on with the especially the portrait tablet. You want to start using the hamburger menu rather than the desktop version, because quite often that's when it starts to run out of space at the top of the screen for all of the navigation items. Actually, one thing I've been curious to get your take on is with sites that have a lot of content and a large number of different pages around different topics and that sort of thing. So they need to have on desktop a mega menu where where you hover over and a lot of pages drop down underneath that menu. What is the best way to handle that sort of navigation, especially on a phone with that hamburger menu structure, it can get ridiculous, and you're better off not having so many sub pages in the menu structure. Is there a better way to approach that?
My personal opinion, or I don't have the data to back this up. My personal opinion is that many people are not going to use the hamburger menu and just scroll down and see what the page is about. So
Yeah.
we try to what we recommend our clients is that they make sure that everything that's accessible through the hamburger menu is also accessible easily by just scrolling down, and I can easily press some icons or some buttons really to access those menus. If it's a mega menu with, we just had a client with like 58 menu items, I think.
Wow.
It gets tricky. It gets tricky, and you probably need to just rely on the internal linking then, and just highlight really the entry points. So I come to this page, I go to the entry point, and then internal linking, and maybe another hot link. They very often call this a hot link section at the top of the pages, where you just can press the different icons, the different buttons.
Mm.
So this could be a way that you just link to this main to the main category or main pillar page, for example, and then you have a hot link section to the pages below. I would probably expect people to press multiple icons. In this case, we have seen mobile hamburger menus that then switch or drop down or something like this, and it gets really complicated, and you want to scroll down because the menu is so long, so you have to scroll down on the sub menu, and this is this third level already. It gets crazy. So I think
Yeah.
I would probably just cut and say, okay, this is the main menu, maybe a second layer if it fits, but probably only just the first one, and then rely on an on-page hot link navigation on top,
Yeah.
and just allow people to then to find what they're looking for in general. And I think this is it's really interesting. I think for me in this case, there are like two parts. There is this overall design where you have the navigation, header, and footer, and then you have the content structure on the other hand. And I think we're going to touch upon this afterwards as well. But in any case, we always want people to find what they're looking for on the top, or know that this is going to answer their questions. So what we, for example, I just was auditing yesterday a website where they have really good articles and a lot of subsections, but you've got no idea at the top that there is a subsection coming. Okay, so whatever you can do in terms of navigation towards the top, so people know that they're on the right page and can really jump rather than browse and search and read, is probably going to be good. So when back to the menu, I think really make it as easy and simple as simple as possible, and easy for clients to head in the right direction, and just with the main category, they know this is for them, and then allow them internal navigation.
Yeah, and so on the page itself, if it is a long page with a lot of stuff in that one article, having a table of contents towards the top to easily just scroll down to the top.
Absolutely. Wikipedia figured this out very early, right?
Yeah.
Wikipedia figured this out very early, way ahead of time. Now everybody is trying to put a table of contents in. We have plugins for WordPress that do this automatically in a more better or worse way, but at least you get something to jump to. I think we need to see that people are not reading from top to bottom. And this is something that really gets forgotten. So people add a paragraph because they think this is an important information. They just add it at the end of the article, but they don't think. And we have done a lot of hotjar studies with scroll tracking and click tracking, etc. There might only be 10% of people really scrolling down on this page. Depends on the niche and the industry. And then if you don't tell them at the top that this section is coming, they just think that this page is not for them.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it's important that they find the bit that they're looking for as early as possible.
What do you think a good header looks like for a mobile phone?
Yeah, so I think it's best to really simplify it down to as little as possible. So all of the pages should be in the navigation, but we make sure that the primary call to action, when we're doing a design, we always identify what is the primary goal of the whole website, and have one clear call to action for the whole site. On a shop, this might be your shop now, or your checkout button or something like that. But quite often for service businesses, it's something like get a quote, or it might be a link to the main service that you want to highlight, or the first step that people are taking. And so we'll have that button sitting at the top, so just sort of one word with a button, and having that follow you as you scroll down through the page. So if you're reading through an article in the blog, that button to get started or take the next step with this company is always there, hovering at the top of your screen, and the menu as well. And then your logo, depending on the type of logo that you have, it might be a good idea to only have that at the top of the page, and when you scroll, that disappears. And then as you're going down the page, the only thing that's following you is that the main call to action, the main step that you want people to take next, and the menu to go to other pages.
That's interesting. Well, I've seen this especially in the footer as well on e-commerce sites, where when you have something on your shopping cart, the next action they really want you to take is check out, pay, and get your order settled. So as soon as you add something to the cart, they would have this in the footer rather than the header. But you would always have in the footer, like, this is in your cart, this is the amount, here you can check out. So it would be, they call this a sticky footer or sticky header, I think, where you say this just follows you. This is always available, so you don't have to think about where is the next call to action as soon as you're ready, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really good as well on a shopping cart, on a shop page, on the actual product page itself, the add to cart button, having that sitting in the sticky footer. So as you're reading about the product, the button is always there. You don't need to find where the button is on the page, because sometimes on a product page that can become quite long, and you read about the product and you're like, yeah, I want it. Where do I find the button? You want to have that sitting there the whole time, so you can easily just go for it. But one thing to consider with the footer is quite often there might be other things that are interfering for that bottom part of the screen on your phone. So one thing is you might have like a scroll to top button. You might have a chatbot button sitting there. There might be a pop-up offer. There might be the GDPR privacy notice. And so there's a lot of things that quite often end up in that bottom part of your screen. So it's something that you need to really rationalize and think about what's the most important things there. And if you're going to have that add to cart at the bottom, you want to make sure that the chatbot's not covering over it. So when you try to click it, you're clicking on the wrong thing. So
I had all of these possible options in one site the other day. There was a scroll to top, there was the chatbot, there was the pop-up offer, and there was the cookie banner. So I had just getting rid of all these things just to finally start scrolling the page. So very, very often the pop-up offers, we ask clients to delay them a little bit, to give them time to accept the cookie banner, the privacy rules, or the chatbot. Maybe not the first thing I need to see is the chatbot can open up 30 seconds or a minute later. Where I'm already maybe in a moment where I have a question. So sometimes we just ask them for a question. They don't even know if this page is what they're looking for. So people are kind of very aggressive, I think, sometimes with the chat feature there. And one thing I found really interesting, I see very rarely a site doing this, I think because it's not implemented in themes, is that they use this bottom right corner for the menu rather than the top and rather than the header, because with the thumb it's just easier to press on the right hand side. So they have this on the right bottom side. You press it, it drops up. You can easily select what you're looking, but you always have this with the same icon, with the same hamburger icon, really. But you have this on the bottom right. I'm really curious why this didn't take on. I think it's just much more user friendly. But I think the developers didn't really jump at it, so the themes just really come from with a normal header menu here. But you're right, it's getting crowded. It might be part of the reason, getting crowded very often in the footer. So you need.
I think probably the main reason is that people are not considering the mobile experience and making an awesome mobile experience. They're just converting their desktop version into small, and that's why it ends up at the top, because that's where it is on the desktop. But I think you're absolutely right, especially if you've got a small child in one hand and you're trying to do something on your phone in the other hand, or something like that. Maybe you've got a coffee, I don't know. And if that's in your left hand, there's no way you're getting your thumb up into that top right corner. But if it's in the bottom of the screen, you can do it. So I think that's absolutely a great idea to design it that way.
No, but it definitely goes together with what you said with the sticky call to action. So you always want to have this just ready and available. You don't want people to scroll. We very often, if they don't have the sticky header, we tell people just to add a call to action after every 2 paragraphs, for example, within their text. So if I read the first two paragraphs, I might not be ready to convert or to opt in, but then I continue reading and then I might be ready. So I don't want to have to scroll back up or down to the footer to find a call to action, because the default very often is just an entire article and at the bottom now you know what you need to do. But people might already be ready to do what you want them to do after the first paragraph. So we try to give them at least several options, which is essentially a no development or no programming task, just to add this image in more often so people can press the button and convert. But obviously, if you can make this sticky, this is a completely different level and absolutely makes sense to make sure people cannot miss it.
Yeah, and I think with regards to the pop-ups and that sort of thing, you're absolutely right about putting off the timing of when those things appear and when those scripts fire. That also goes into helping with the speed factor as well, which is a big one on mobile. And for pop-ups, another thing that we are going with these days is making sure, instead of taking over the bottom of your screen or taking over the whole screen, once again, quite often the desktop pop-up is just displaying over the whole screen on the mobile, and that's a horrible user experience on the phone. Firstly, you want to make sure that it is very easy to close all of these pop-ups and things with a nice big X that's not like tiny that you need to get a pen out just to click it. But yeah, you want to we start using the top of the screen. So instead of it taking over the whole lot, we're just taking over just a small part of the top of the screen for that call to action or pop up for people to opt in or whatever, get their claim their 20% discount or whatever it is, and making it very easy to close that if they're not interested, but also making sure it's not taking over the whole screen and you can still read what's going on.
Mm, absolutely, it's a lot of great advice here. When it comes to then texture formatting, do you have any guidelines here? What could be that could be followed if I have an article for a 5,000 words article? Isn't rare these days, very often, because a couple of years back it probably ranked better than a shorter article. These days it's a little bit different. But very often we come across long articles. What can I do with a long article to make this easier to consume on a mobile phone?
I think it's a tough one because it is there's going to be a lot of scrolling, but making sure that the formatting is using the full width of the screen so that you're not you're making using as much of your vertical height as possible. You want the text to go all the way out, and making sure that you're uh, the way you're using your images and stuff is also not forcing too much extra vertical space, so you have to do a lot of scrolling past big images or whatever. I think that's definitely a good thing, and using that table of contents so that I don't need to scroll through the entire page to make sure to get to the section that I wanted to read. And I think when you do have a long page like that, making sure that you have a scroll to top or even a scroll to bottom button. Sometimes you can have both of those, so you can speed up the scrolling that way. But I think clear headings and a table of content are definitely the most important things. There's a few other things that we look at apart from just articles, but other sort of common elements on websites where you have it's common to have sort of tiles. So you'll have maybe 3 or 4 things across the page, and the common thing is to just then have them exactly the same, but they're on top of each other, and you need to scroll through 2 pages of stuff to get past that one section. I think it's important in most cases to think about rearranging how those are laid out, and maybe if they have an image with them, displaying that image really small so it's only taking up like a third of the screen, and the text can be next to it. Generally that works. It might depend on the images or the icons that you have. Also having things like you might have media appearances with a whole bunch of logos, and by default that will just turn into a massive screen that you need to scroll past, and that's annoying as a website user. Even the blog feed, it's quite common to have the blog feed with a nice big square image for each one, and text and a title under it and a read more button, and you can do away with a lot of that, and once again just have the thumbnail image really small on the side of the screen, and stack them on top of each other so you can see the whole 3 or 4 blog items all on the one screen. So there's a lot of things like that. Also using it's called a accordion, so like that FAQ style collapsible content that can be really good, especially on like product pages and stuff like that, where you might not want to read all of the different technical specs and descriptions and that sort of thing. Having that stuff inside collapsible tabs that you can click on. And speaking of clicking on, a common sort of thing is to have a hover state to in the design to be able to tell whether something's a button or not, and that just doesn't work on a phone. So it's important that you do make sure that everything's that is click onable is very easy to visually see that without having to hover over it to realize that it's a button. So that's something to consider on the mobile as well.
Definitely an important one. A moment back to the longer articles. One thing we really recommend people also is to kind of highlight in the longer, especially on a longer text, highlight a few words in every paragraph. So I don't have the feeling I need to read from the top to the bottom to really get what this is about, but I can just read essentially the bold words by quickly scrolling down and then maybe read the subsection or subheadline you might have on top and decide, okay, these two paragraphs I really want to read, and then I continue skimming. Or another thing I've seen, which I really liked, is that if you already assume that people on a mobile phone might not be ready to read the entire article, or maybe even in a desktop, sometimes something that looks great is if there is some sort of progress bar where you see how far do I really scroll, and the farther you go down, the longer the progress bar. So like in a video really, where you have a sense of how far am I going to scroll, which is hard to have sometimes on a mobile phone. Or when people just offer directly an opt-in, could really be download this article or get this article by email or something like this, where it's like, okay, this is the best article I've ever seen about this topic, but I'm not in a position to read this right now. Some people might send a URL to their email address or save this with some bookmarking app or something like this, but maybe offering a call to action and say, look, get this article by email. Especially on longer articles might be an interesting way to solve this. Definitely the table of contents is probably one of the main things my clients already know that we definitely need. And I think it's very often it's just really about taking a mobile phone. I ask clients to switch Wi-Fi off to not cover any speed issues or big images, etc. And just really navigate your phone and assess the importance. And I really like when you talked about the icons showing like really big. Very often we give certain icons a very low importance on our website on the desktop, like the media appearances or the blog feed, etc., or social media. We've seen really screen filling social media icons on mobile versions. So you scroll down and you see Facebook, Twitter, they would be the most important thing. And then you click on those icons. They don't have engagement. They don't have comments. They don't have shares. There's really not more behind this than the icon and the Facebook.com page. But it's like you have a tiny little icon in the footer. You don't really, you don't even need it, but you just have it there because it was part of the theme. But then you make it screen filling on the mobile version just because nobody cared about the mobile version enough to really readjust priorities. And this is where also the tiles came in. I think the tile designs really came from the tablets. When the tablets came about, everything was in tiles, and there were different layouts that were easy to press and on a tablet, and from there we still have a lot of designs left. But also, for example, the sidebar. Very often people rely on the sidebar for everything, and they say, no, my call to action and my lead magnets, my conversion, my opt-ins, everything is in the sidebar anyway. The sidebar isn't there. The sidebar on a mobile phone is at the very end of the page by default. So whatever you have in the sidebar, there's a chance only 5% of your mobile users might see it, if at all. Everything else, you need to make sure that in the main content stream I'm seeing when I scroll down is coming up, because otherwise it's going to be completely invisible.
Yeah, I would absolutely. I'd recommend getting rid of the sidebar altogether. I don't think it's is worth having anymore at all. And yeah, as you mentioned on the if you do have it on the desktop version, on the mobile version, it's just going to be pushed down to the bottom of the page, and then people are reading through the article, and then they just get to a great wall of your sidebar stuff. And it's not a very good experience once they get to that stage. So yeah, you are better off not having that, and trying to work whatever it is that you're trying to do in the sidebar. Really need to rationalize what parts of that do the visitors need to actually see, and you probably shouldn't have 3 or 4 different call to actions in your sidebar. You should only have one, and that should be the main call to action for that page, which you highlight at the top and the bottom, and your testimonials or things like that. It is good to sprinkle testimonials throughout your site, but perhaps not on an article page, or that's something that could go towards the bottom. Things like your category navigation can just sit at the bottom of the article. Quite often now, the related posts is a better thing to have than category navigation. Sometimes depends on the blog, and also the search. That's another sort of common one to have. And I think if you've got a lot of articles and a lot of great information that people might want to search through, I think that's a good one to perhaps put in the menu. So in the hamburger menu at the bottom of the pages, you can put the search function there. But yeah, I've seen a lot of designs where the search goes into the header, and I think that is something that sort of clutters up the header unnecessarily. And I've also seen service business websites that have not got very many blog posts and just a handful of pages, and they've got a search bar in the top of the website. And why do you need that? So
you really just came with a theme. It was already there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with all these sort of elements of the page, you really need to justify why it needs to be there. Does it really need to be? And if it doesn't need to be there for the customer to get what they need and to make the decision to buy from you, then just get rid of it. And like you're saying, the social media icons, definitely I would recommend only ever putting them as small things in the footer. And even then, you don't really need them, because the idea of social media is you get people to come from social media to your website, not the other way around.
I think the footer is going to be the place where people search for this anyway. So if I want to follow you and I want to be able to click on a Facebook icon or Instagram or YouTube icon, I'm going to scroll down to the footer anyway to see if I can find it there. One thing I do think could be interesting for the header, especially when people are on their phone, a phone number. So if I have customer support and I have a business where I'm used to getting calls, or calls might be even the goal of my website to drive those calls, having the phone number in the header seems to be a good conversion. So the call to action, as you say, should be on top. In this case, this could be really the place for the phone number. I have a phone in my mind and in my hand. I might make the decision right now to call you. So let me just press this phone number. There is a special coding you can use to have phones react to those phone numbers. So and you can also we do conversion tracking on clicks on phone numbers, so you get an idea how many people click the phone number, how many people where did those people come from, how many people came maybe from articles then clicked on the phone number or something like this, to get an idea how this really works out, also based on data. I think I'm going to do a recap at the end of here, because there was a lot of information. I was just wondering right now about, we usually have this normal transition from desktop to mobile design. If I do a mobile design first, how do you transition a mobile design to a desktop version?
Yeah, so it's generally a lot easier, because you've got all the elements already there in an easy to use format. But you might consider spacing things out in the reverse, so where you have your blog items stacked on top of each other to make it fit nicely on a little screen. You might space that out into that tile layout for the desktop and things like that. I think that still on the desktop version, things like your sidebar, you're still better off putting a lot of that stuff into the footer, and really using the most out of your footer space for anything that's not essential. And obviously with your menu, you still want to keep your menu to the minimum number of pages. So instead of it being in the hamburger, you still want to really think about all those pages, and do they need to be there? If they're not crucial, especially for the first time experience, or I think that's most of the traffic on a lot of sites is first time visitors. And so the pages that you have across the top really need to be the important ones for those visitors. Returning visitors will look for things that they want in the footer. if they know that it's there somewhere. So I think that it's sometimes not as crucial. It always depends on the business. But another big thing as well is um, that it's quite common to have a large hero image across the whole screen on the desktop. That's definitely a big one on your homepage and that sort of thing. You want to avoid that as much as possible on the mobile. If you're going to have an image, make it a smaller one that's just, in there next to the text rather than being a background image behind the text, because you either lose the text or you lose the image, and so there's no point. And you're just loading a large image that slows down the page from loading. So for that initial load time, you want to keep your images to a minimum. But then on the desktop version, you can probably get away with that. So you can have one sort of layout and set of images loading for the mobile version, and different image loading for the desktop version.
Mhm. Amazing. I want to mention here, when we talk about speed, we had on episode 22, we talked a lot about the technical side of things, and also more about caching plugins, speed optimizations, etc. So if anybody's interested in these kinds of things, you were generously giving a lot of advice on episode 22. This is under seoleverage.com/podcast, and then select 22. I want to recap a little bit because we have got a lot of information here. I think people are going probably taking notes here. We started saying that the moment on a mobile phone is very different. You said you might be in bed just checking your emails before you go to sleep, or checking your social media, or following a link on social media, and maybe reading the article. Then the moment is very different. You might not be in work mode. You might not have the time to really engage with a particular type of content. The layout in general, the header, footer need to be in line. You made a great suggestion with the call to action being sticky, always on top. Even if I scroll down, it can be the call to action on top. The logo could essentially disappear. The menu is usually a hamburger menu anyway, but should be limited to the most crucial elements. So the navigation is really easy. You talked about the layout, where we try to not rely on a sidebar to present important content, but rather forget about the sidebar. The sidebar would be on the bottom anyway, where hardly anybody sees it. So we focus more on embedding those elements into the main section where people can really see them. We talked about icons being adjusted in size so they don't get more importance than they deserve on a mobile phone, and things like FAQ sections can be in an accordion style, where you can just drop out the question answer you are really interested in. Hover state is an important one. Many people definitely recognize on websites what to click on, just because the color changes when you move the mouse over it. It doesn't work on mobile phones. And in general, I think this is also something, thankfully, Google puts out more and more, that we need to just care about mobile user experience. So Google would point out if there is text that's too small to read on a mobile phone. Google would point out if there are elements too close together, so you can't really press them with a thumb easily. We need to make it crystal clear. We need to make this a mobile first approach. I think I have probably 2 or 3 clients that get less than half more of mobile traffic, and they're usually in B2B spaces, and really on spaces where the only people coming to their specific offer are usually sitting in front of a computer anyway, but everybody else gets at least half or more mobile traffic. I usually recommend my clients to end their week taking out their mobile phone, switching off Wi-Fi, trying to establish a normal user task on their website they expect users to do, and just make a note of everything that bothers them. This can be huge spaces, this can be huge icons, this can be, like you say, those media mentions. We have to scroll 4 times just to go across all the media mentions. People are going to give up earlier. I really like this when you said this at the beginning. People are going to give up faster on a mobile phone than on the desktop, because they're not in an environment where they're going to spend too much time to just hit the back button, click on another Google result, and see if another website does a better job. One thing we mentioned where we can make sure we communicate that our website is giving the information they're looking for would be the table of contents on top. I think this is definitely one of the main things everybody can implement really quickly with some plugins and proper styling, formatting on the articles. And we talked about longer articles really needing some formatting, highlighting, make it easy to skim. People are not going to read an article on your website, like they read a book on their mobile phone, maybe on their Kindle app or whatever, they're not going to dedicate the same time. Everybody expects to be able to skim a text, really quickly find what they're looking for, then maybe leave your page. We talked about bounce rates. You mentioned not necessarily a higher bounce rate on a content site is a bad thing. People might just have found exactly what they were looking for. And we also already have them and might be able to do some remarketing, retargeting afterwards anyway. Or maybe they were not in the moment to opt in anyway. This was really lots of information, I think. I really appreciate you sharing this. Did we forget anything we should mention here when it comes to mobile layout, design, user experience you think people should take into account?
I don't think so. I think we sort of covered a lot. I think we really covered all the main things. There's a lot of small bits and pieces we could talk about, but I think that's really the main things you need to
Awesome.
think about and worry about. Definitely having a look at your site right now on your phone, because you probably haven't for a while, is a good first step.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. It was really great value. If people want to get in touch with you, would this be heading over to tunewp.com?
Yeah. Or you can send an email to support@tuneswp.com. And yeah, if you have any questions or want us to take a look at your site and see what we can suggest to improve, yeah, absolutely feel free. We can do a free audit for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Justin. If you're listening to this and you think this could be interesting for someone else who has a little bit of a crappy side on mobile phones, definitely forward this episode to them. Definitely encourage you to check out your website more often than your social media on a mobile phone, so you are aware of what's happening, what is the situation people are faced with when they are on their website. I just yesterday had a call with a client who gets 75% of their traffic on a mobile phone from mobile phones, and literally never checks out his website on a mobile phone because he likes navigating it on a desktop. We really need to put ourselves in our prospect's shoes and figure out what is it they are confronted with, what could be a deal breaker for them, what could be provoking them or trigger them to give up and head over to another site. So make sure you have a good idea about what your mobile version looks like. When we do our Erica consultings, this is just part of what we do on a regular basis anyway. So we try to navigate clients' websites on a mobile phone and point out. I just earlier prepared a session where we just pointed out with a few screenshots, really big icons they had on the footer. Just like you said, the media mentions are just a very likely candidate to take up much more space than they should. But we also pointed out like large text sections where you say, okay, nobody's going to read this just to figure out what this is. They're going to scroll past this or leave the page. So just make sure you have a very good idea what your site does on a mobile phone. And whenever there is a change, revisit those changes. And really for speed optimizations or general technical advice, head over to the episode 22, where Justin generously gave a lot of advice, named plugins, etc. you can use on your websites. And for any technical advice, I honestly can recommend Justin's services. Many clients come back happy with faster sites and technically better improved sites. So definitely tunewp.com, check it out. Thank you so much, Justin. Great to have you on the show again.
Cheers, Gert. Thanks for having me, mate.
Cheers.
Cheers.